Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, interview time is here. That's right, we're talking to Jeremy Kasten about his new movie, The Dead Ones, on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from a very smoky place in Southern California. This is Kill by Kill, and a little bit different than our usual show. We're not talking about an ancient release from the 1970s, 80s, or, oh my god, even the 90s. Ugh, how gross. We're talking about a much more recent film with a filmmaker that I know very well, and you know him as well. He's a returning champion here to Kill by Kill. He's an editor and director whose latest, The Dead Ones, will be released by Kino Lorber on Blu-ray on September 29th. He's the one, the only Jeremy Kasten. How are you doing today, Jeremy?
Oh, I'm spectacular. Thanks, Patrick. I'm really happy to be on the show.
I'm very happy to have you back. Last time you were here, we forced you to discuss at length Friday the 13th movie.
Well, sure, because we had the Crispin Glover connection.
Yes, of course. And, you know, I just had to have Glover insight. I needed to know in any way, shape, or form, if someone could penetrate what that Glover thing is, well, you would know more than most because you had worked with him, and we got some nice, fun stories out of that.
I bet everybody who works with Crispin Glover has nice, fun stories. I have a feeling that the guy is a dynamo on the set on everything he's ever touched.
I believe that to be true, but. Here's the thing that when we had talked about you having this movie come out and talking about it, there was the thing that I always say about you, ran to the front of my mind, which is every conversation I've ever had with you, Jeremy, over the several years, well, somewhere in the early 2000s.
I'm going to say decades now, yeah.
Yeah. That I have been around you and known you and sat around and talked. Every time we have a conversation, you say one thing that blows my mind about your life. You just happen to have these stories that come out of left field for me. Like I obviously am more of a blank slate than the rest of our crew because I married an Emerson alum and you were an Emerson alum.
Sure. And
that you all knew much more about one another than I did. I was an outsider to it all. But then I would hear these tidbits and I would go, wait, what did you just say? How is this possible? How am I just finding this out? And it was like every single time. So I definitely want to have the opportunity to sit down for you, even if it was just a personal record for me of what is going on in your life.
I'm so excited to share all of it.
So let's harken back. You're a human being, correct?
I am a person. I am a human entity.
Born of two human parents.
That's right. Flesh and blood.
What area of the country did that happen in?
I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland in the 70s at a time where the kids I knew were some of them anyway, were the kids of the people who were in John Waters' early films.
Right.
So, John Waters made movies starting in the late 60s. And so the weirdo, kids of the weirdo hippies that I grew up with, some of them were, their parents were famous to me, but I only found out later in life.
So it was in the air.
Yes.
And so when it came to your growing up, was movies or TV or media of any kind like always around? Was it something that you immediately were drawn to, or was it something you circled back to?
No. I was a weird kid who didn't play sports and wanted to do theater and loved putting on puppet show. Like exactly the kind of kid that your parents worry a little bit about. And they did, but instead of, freaking out, they let me do what I was going to. I think they knew that it wasn't going to work with the sports or, I know you did Boy Scouts, right?
I did do Boy Scouts, but it was against my will.
Right. I would, it wouldn't, even if I had been sent against my will, it would not have been successful. I would have really made a mess of it. So yeah, they put me in plays and theater school, and I loved, as I went to a camp when I was about 5 that gave me the opportunity at a theater camp to be around older kids who spent the night. I did not. And they showed silent horror movies at night at this summer camp. Oh. And I saw my first silent Lon Chaney movies there, and it fucked me up, but good. Can I curse on the show? I think.
Yeah. Oh, fuck yes.
Yeah. No, it did. The damage was done, and I don't want to say that was like my favorite stuff. I loved movies, and I was a latchkey kid, so I grew up on crappy TV and came home and watched, garbage like Gomer Pyle or whatever was on, and sat and watched. Now I worry when my kids watch 2 hours of TV a week, but as a kid I'm sure I was watching it for 8 hours a day.
Right.
And I loved scary stuff early on. I loved it, and musicals and scary movies. They somehow have a weird connective tissue between them.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I think that's revelatory to the kinds of things that you ended up creating, because I think they're wonderful mash-em-ups. I often felt because I sort of came at you sideways. I don't even think I had been told that you had directed a movie until after I'd seen like music video type stuff and stage shows and comedy sketches.
Sure.
And then someone says, "Oh no, he's a horror movie director." I'm like, there was another thing like, "What the fuck are you talking about? That Jeremy? That guy directs horror movies?"
I think horror movie people are often very lighthearted people because they're exercising their stuff, right?
Yeah.
I've met a lot of Herschel and Lewis or William Castle, or these like great ballyhoo filmmakers of horror. Even like you look at Alfred Hitchcock, it's so tongue in cheek the way he like made a character out of himself. But I think that's common, right? They're not usually guys who, are like hanging out in goth clubs and capes.
No, I often sort of lament the idea, and I think because there's a certain time frame in which horror movies were put in the same category of like, oh, he likes heavy metal and horror movies, where there's just like, a lot of patches on the denim vest sort of thing. Yeah. It's as much stereotyping as anything else, because obviously I was really into horror movies and absolutely not into those other things. But it's also that a lot of people who sort of wear it as a t-shirt, like, I am horror movies. And you're kind of like, should you be?
Right.
Should anyone be?
Yeah.
It's like this is a thing we enjoy, and it's a thing we can make, and it's a thing we can talk about, and it's a thing that is really, really fun. But also, do you really just want to be horror movies? That's
it's like people who like to hunt how they wear camo all the time. Like, you're not hunting right now, right? I can see you at the grocery store.
Right.
You're not hiding.
Well, that's the thing is, if you hide out by the bananas long enough, you get a deal on mangoes. And that's the thing they don't tell you about at Ralph's. But if you do it long enough, you figure out the system.
Yeah.
So you're growing up and you see these silent horror films and they make a massive impression on you. But at what point in the sort of theatrical version of you putting on a show? Because that is the thing that always leapt out to me about you, was I'm putting on a show. and you were a brand unto yourself when you walked in the room. Whereas I always showed up places and they're like, oh, still buying t-shirts at the Gap, eh? And So I was like, oh, I was amazed that you had a capacity for self. It never felt fake. It always felt genuinely you.
So in Baltimore, because of all the things that we discussed, and maybe like my mom dated Barry Levinson in high school. I mean, there's definitely something there, right? Like
I love you casually drop this shit, but okay, go on.
Baltimore is the only place that I've been in the U.S. so far, other than maybe New Orleans, where you would get beat up for not being weird enough, right? And so I think being like, here's who I am. I grew up in the 80s, right? When people were, punk rock. Like you had to, if you did not have a lot of safety pins on your clothing, you were a lame-o. And I didn't want to be, I was like, well, isn't that now everybody, you guys all still look the same. Even my friends, like people I love dearly, I was like, but it's kind of the same thing, right? If you're preppy or you're punk rock, you're a thing. And so I picked, because of my theater, because I was a theater guy, and it's like I'm gonna do a different thing. I picked when I was like 11. I'm gonna be the guy who wears ties.
Yes,
and that was I think that was the beginning of the self branding, right? Where I'm the tie guy. I'm gonna wear sharkskin suits, and when I hadn't worn dungarees, and I do make my kids call them dungarees because they could. It upsets my mother-in-law. I didn't wear them till high school. I was like, I bought a pair of jeans in 10th grade just because I was a little bit giving myself over to like changing up the brand. I didn't obviously see it as branding, and it's nice what you say, but I never thought like, I'm gonna walk in a room and be like, here, I'm Jeremy Kasten, and I think that I grew up in a place where you were encouraged not to be afraid to be weird and to be different and to show it off. And so putting on a show is I'm sure some of it's genetic, but also some of it's just the place I'm from, and conveniently that faded in well with the guy I am.
Yeah, I can totally believe that. Now you ended up attending a theater forward high school, or
I did. It was my second high school.
Was it like a fame sitch where it's like everyone here is trying to be a star?
It was definitely, everyone there was very aware of fame. It wasn't so long after fame, so there was a lot of dancing in the hallways and singing, and I mean, in retrospect, it was incredible. But I was kind of an angry young man, I suppose.
Sure.
I had gone to a different high school. I did not get into the Baltimore School for the Arts for 9th grade. It was my dream to get in there for 9th grade. But I had all this really musical theater-y training and done all these shows that were, like if you ended a song with your hands in the air in a regular show, that shows I was doing was like you had to shove them as high in the air and as expressive, just over the top, like Carnival Cruise Lines level of like musical theater. And so I did not get in, and I was devastated. I went to a different high school that was lovely and set up, with all the punk rock kids. And that's when, that sort of happened for me. And then I got caught smoking pot in the woods halfway through 10th grade. And so gratefully, and I, to this day, thank the School for the Arts they let me transfer in middle of the year after I had not gotten in because you auditioned to get in. And then I worked hard to not be musical. I think I'd had enough tragedy at that point. It took the edge off of the Carnival Cruise Lines approach to theater. And so, I then, and it was a very intense, we had all these, I don't want to say like if you can't teach, these were actual actors and directors and who did local theater, but they were also very intense about teaching kids not like they were children. I remember chasing a girl. We had this company come from Israel that was going to teach us special, weirdo theater techniques, and chasing a girl around a room, whipping her with my belt, and she was in a bra. And I was like, theater class anyway has a lot of like massage.
Yeah, it's all just on the edge of a cult.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, a lot of stuff where you're like, breathe in, breathe out. Spend 4 hours doing warm-up exercises where people walked around and looked like you look like you just walked into an insane asylum. And I remember thinking like, this can't be right to let kids with their forming brains. I've been doing all this acid and here I am all tired coming here and this is wrong. But it was great. I only realized it later that it was very lucky because I already knew I wanted to make movies, and it gave me a lot of access to how actors work. Like I understood a lot more about actors, I think, going into film school than, for better or worse, I think a lot of people do coming out of film school.
So you managed to get through this system to the point where you enter college. Was film your major in college, or did you go into an after post graduation?
It was my major, and for anyone listening who's thinking about going to college for film school, I'll tell you definitely don't do that. It's a huge mistake. If you love movies, you're gonna see Citizen Kane anyway. There's no reason to take a class. You don't need to, watch the early documentaries. They're great. It's really interesting, but you don't need that class. Mm-hmm. I minored in history. I'm glad I did. Wait, are we moving on past high school?
No, we don't have to do anything. I was just wondering.
You missed the nugget from high school.
Well,
I was sure you were leading into it.
I thought maybe you were going to do it on your own, but please tell the audience. One day, someone passing around a picture said, did you know that did you ever see Jeremy in high school? I can only imagine this. And they show me this picture. It's a picture of you, and you look exactly how I pictured you. But who you were with was not who I pictured you with.
Yes. I was in that theater ensemble with the lunatic classroom with the chasing the girl with the belt and encouraged by teachers. So I don't want to be unclear. That was part of the class. I was in theater ensemble for half my day for several years with Tupac and Jada, actually.
Yeah. Which makes sense because they're Baltimore kids. But
right. Yeah. Tupac, I think it was in New York and then switched to Baltimore and then ended up in going back to Cali.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so do you feel like at that point it's always interesting when someone grows up around someone famous, but they are not famous yet.
Yes.
Did you feel like, I can see like a path, like I can see, like, obviously they're two very attractive people.
Sure.
So they got that going on for them,
yeah.
Which, not all of us are blessed with, but also they're not as attractive as they would become because they're still forming into real human beings.
Definitely in the case of Jada, that's true.
So, but did you feel like when they did hit that level, did you go, I was right or I was wrong or I didn't see this coming?
With Tupac, I wouldn't have necessarily seen it coming. With Jada, if you had asked me in 10th grade where she was headed, I wouldn't have exactly nailed like Will Smith and power couple of Hollywood, but sure. I would have said like she's got something burning in her that she is going to fight for tooth and nail. And, not to say she's not talented or whatever, but she was intense even then. She played my son. We did it. These like theater ensembles, this isn't like 60 people in a room. It's like 11, Yeah. So we were together a lot, but we didn't get along particularly. But she did play my son in A Wrinkle in Time. She played the youngest. I can't remember the name of that character, Timmy or something. Yeah,
the one who's the math genius.
Yes, exactly, with the glasses.
Yeah, okay.
And I was the dad trapped in the
Tesseract.
And we did other local educational videos for PBS or whatever together. Tupac and I actually were weekend friends, not super close, but he slept at my house. I sold him his first LSD and then took it. He was nervous to try it. So I was like, well, just come over and we'll take acid. So I am proud to say that I've tripped with Tupac Shakur. And the girl that he was in love with, who was also in love with him, was my first love. So we have a friend in common who was the first girl that I was head over heels in love with, that I was 18 and gonna marry.
You're bound
that was the
by
girl
passions.
that he had written a bunch of poetry and early raps for. So That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, it's high school. That's high school. It just happens that you all are in a place where you're getting interviewed and stuff like that. Or in his case, all right. So let's not get too ramped up on that.
Sure.
Because
So all that
would be a
happened.
very depressing course for us. But
Yes.
let's remember him how we want to remember him, tripping out in your house.
Yes.
So you now move on now to college, and you're in film school, and you're doing all the things that you could have done by just going to the local video store. But now you're formally doing it in college. But are you also like learning how to edit at this point, or is that just a byproduct of going through film school?
I had grown up making Super 8 movies. Did you do that? Did you have a Super 8 camera?
No. Oh my God. I was not allowed access to such things. It was a miracle I had access to books. It well, listen, I was the firstborn in a Mormon family, and they were just experimenting how to make sure that I was untouched by the world as long as possible.
Right.
And so, that meant I did not have the freedom to roam. So I was not having Tupac Shakur over to my house to trip on acid.
Well, you showed them, because look at you. You're making a big famous podcast about a series of icky movies.
I've said, they don't believe what I do is real. That somehow I'm gaining just enough money by illegal means to front to the world that I'm a professional writer. They don't quite ever get it. And they're just waiting for the collapse. So in a non-hateful way, but in one that they've built up inside of them that they need to say is, I told you so. And they'll have that moment. But so far, my modicum of success has not allowed them to break forth with that quite yet.
You're getting there.
Yeah. Listen, I'm out of the prediction business. Who can say what will happen in 2021?
Sure.
So, but at this time, it's, I didn't have also this sort of, I don't have a bevy of college friends. And yet out of that sort of college experience, I assume that you gained a group of people that you knew both had been there or came in after you or concurrent to you that you end up using as a transition point to get to Hollywood.
Yeah. So, yes, I suppose I met people that I wanted to work with, and it wasn't really in class. I was making stuff on the weekends. I started making movies, on videotape because there was sound on it. And the Super 8 movies I made growing up were silent. And so to be clear, though I'm not from a Mormon family, I had to pay for my own film and processing. Making a movie was a big deal with your allowance because it was $13 a roll and 12 to process it. And that was 2.5 minutes of film. So when I got my first video camera going to college, I was like, stuff is like, you could shoot a whole movie. And so I shot a whole movie. Sophomore year, I made my first feature and met a lot of people that I continued, and even now I'm friends with, to work with, but just on the weekends, like it was outside of school. And Emerson has the Los Angeles program where they send you to LA and you work for free at some office, making copies or laminating But I went out there the summer before I was doing the LA program because I had friends who lived already in an apartment there. And I started working right away, not because I'm a amazing, useful human, but because I didn't really want to laminate. So, and I love sleazy movies. So I wanted to work on, the video boom was still going on. So I got to work on these Witchcraft 4's $60,000 movie. And there I was like, I'm an associate producer. I thought that meant a producer. I didn't understand. Like that's what they call the PA who's making, $110 a week plus gas money or whatever. And then went back to Boston after that summer and semester. So I was there 9 months. I'd gotten editing credits. I was making movies and went back and had to live and go to the video store and see movies coming out that I'd worked on. But I was like, oh, wait, no, I just get back there. So when I returned after I graduated and friends also came out, we kind of schemed to make our first movie after I'd edited several more super sleazy low budget movies.
But there's something to be said for super sleazy movies as a entree to practical experience that, as highbrow and as well-intentioned as a college education might be,
sure,
the practicalities of I love that you are bringing all this theory to bear, but we need it by Friday.
Yes.
Like, sometimes you need the we need it by Friday experience.
Yes.
So
absolutely. And, like those kind of movies, they don't get to do 50 takes. They get to do 2. And you learn a lot as an editor that way. And or see, sometimes having 5 takes is useful for sure.
So what do you think was the most valuable experience on that very base level of working out here that you took forward, where you're like, okay, if there's the thing that if I'm ever going to get the chance to actually do this myself, I'm either going to do A or never do B.
Oh, well, I will definitely say that I learned very quickly, speaking of like number of takes, as an editor, as a young editor, working with, both young filmmakers who'd made their first, I worked on a movie called Legion of the Night that was about cybernetic zombie assassins. The kid
of course
was like
was.
23 and he'd made a movie for $30,000 in Michigan with Ron Ashton from Iggy and the Stooges. And
sure.
It's like he pulled all the talent. And I got to work on a bunch of those kind of movies.
Yeah.
And I saw efficiency at work, but I also got to work on a lot of movies. A lot of times in that world, there's guys who like, I'm not saying this movie, but I'm just pulling a random one. But like if you directed, Weekend at Bernie's, actually that is one that I got to work on. It's a guy who did that movie and then went on to maybe less stellar stuff. And he still was shooting like, 20 takes of the same thing. I promised myself as an editor sitting there, watching somebody just shoot the same, like as though they were Kubrick, like, oh, there's no reason to do that. If it's good, move on, because he never would have enough coverage or enough movie. And you were like, yeah, no, it's probably better just to say, take 2 was good. We can stop. And I learned a lot from that. And I did promise myself I would never be a filmmaker. And actually, on my first movie and on most of my movies, I don't shoot, you're supposed to like shoot the master wide shot, then you get the medium shot, and then you get the close-ups. I really try not to shoot a wide shot that, like if you have a scene that's 5 pages, that's 5 minutes of a wide shot. But really, you don't cut back to that wide shot. You just go for the beginning and the end of the scene.
Right.
So I just shoot the beginning and the end of the scene in the wide shot and skip all the middle and just shoot that in close-ups.
Sure. So
not brilliant, but like figured that out early on,
But that's a practicality. Like
yes.
That is on the job training.
For
and
sure.
That's one of those things where if you're wrapped up in a sort of educational concept of how a movie is created, and then you go on a set and see how a movie is created, those are ultimately 2 different things.
Absolutely.
It's the difference between learning, like you could hand someone a pamphlet and go, all right, you're going to learn how to ride a bike. You get on this metal contraption. It's got 2 rubber wheels. Blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, well, that seems easy enough. When you get on a bike, like that's a whole different schmear.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
There's a lot of real life physics involved in riding a bike rather than learning to ride a bike.
Yes, or reading a book about learning to ride a bike.
Exactly. Or studying how someone else learned how to ride a bike.
Right. Yes. Movies have lots of that. And there's a lot of people who've read a lot of books who are very prepared in their mind, but the actual, like here's one, movies are mostly not, I don't want to say blue collar, but like the people who are going to get your movie made, they're grips, they're the electricians, they're the sound guy. Like it's not really, you're not sitting around talking about what you thought that your intentions were behind what the scene really is about. You have those conversations with the actors, but most of your time is spent being like, hey, can we get a stinger over here and run power? Oh yeah. Can't wait till it breaks so we can eat donuts. Like that's actually what you want to be, that guy, because the more comfortable you are with those guys, the easier a time you're going to have getting your movie made.
Yeah, it's a movable feast, and if you cease to move, like, you will get eaten. That is how these things operate.
What a very complicated, like, double analogy that was. That's amazing. That is why you're a writer, man. It's a movable feast, and if you stop moving, you're gonna get eaten.
I don't think I came up with that. I think that is somewhat famous.
I had never heard it before. I'm having that tattooed on my arm.
Let's talk about the first movie then. So you're hustling did something happen before Attic Expeditions? I know you were editing a whole bunch, but was Attic Expeditions your literal first pro movie? Yes. I'm going to do this.
I was editing crappy movies and working for companies that would buy movies like, the one with the cybernetic zombie assassins, and they buy it on a trailer. And then they, ship a guy from Michigan to an editing bay with me and be like, hey, can this guy crash on your couch? And, here's another $100 a week to feed him and drive him around. And so I did that for, a couple of years, but it was hard because I already felt like I had the script for Attic Expeditions. It was written to be Witchcraft 4, which I mentioned earlier, which was my first foray into associate producing. But I didn't give it to them because my writing partner at the time wrote it in a week to be that script. They didn't have a script yet, and they were shooting in 3 weeks.
How unlike a witchcraft movie. You're blowing my mind.
But it had sex, and it had one location, and very few and a small cast, and so he kind of threw this thing together. And when he sent it to me, I was like, I'm not gonna I want to make this movie. So it had it for all those years. I actually tried to make it at Emerson for my practicum, for my whatever they call it, BFA, and I was turned down. They said we do not want you to make a horror film to graduate from the program, but you're so talented. Why don't you make a movie about a little boy who loses his violin? That's the kind of film you should be making. I was like, I'll take the other degree. That's okay. I got a BS in film, which is, amazing that it's called a BS. I can't even believe. So yeah, I edited a bunch, and it was driving me nuts to work on all these other movies. And so one day I came home to my roommate, who was a production assistant at the time, and I said, you ready to be a producer? Let's figure out how to raise money, and I can't take it anymore. Let's go make a movie.
Now, were you living in this house that you made it, or was this a different house?
No, we did live there while we shot the movie, but no, we were living in an apartment in Fairfax.
Okay.
With 5 guys crammed into, every nook and cranny.
You could just said an apartment in Fairfax, and I
you
would have
understood
filled in that other information, but it's important for other people who live in other parts of the world to know.
Yeah.
That is at one point what Fairfax was. I think it's more highfalutin now as every part of it.
It was certainly not that then.
Yeah. So because that house is, let's go back to a couple of things about that movie that I just adore. When it comes to that cast in particular, you start off with Jeffrey Combs, who returned to several of your films over the years. What is it like to establish that kind of relationship? How do you approach that? Because I assume you're like, that's Jeffrey fucking Combs.
Oh, absolutely.
But you can't necessarily do that with him in the room, but also it's kind of hard to deny.
I was 25. I had grown up on genre films. I had grown up, Reanimator came out when I was in high school. So I'd seen it thousands of times. And, everything else he'd done with Stuart Gordon. And I just thought, he's the modern day Vincent Price, which I still think really. And that's dream casting, and he was the first person we cast. Actually, as we were raising money, we hired a casting director. I told him I wanted Jeffrey for the movie. We made an offer, and Jeffrey said yes, and we had to put money in a bank before we had any more money. Like, that was all the money we'd raised. It was like, there's money in a bank for you. We're still raising money. And I got to go out to lunch with him, which I did a bunch after that. But that first time, of course, I was like nervous and geeking out, and we hit it off. And he's really the reason, Seth Green and Wendy Roby and Ted Raimi and Alice Cooper. It's really, they all wanted to work with Jeffrey Combs. The Frighteners had come out not too long before that.
Oh yeah.
And that performance, I feel like, is just. It's really, to be the best thing in a Peter Jackson movie is really something, right? And I feel
it's so committed. It is so it is such a real thing to that character on screen.
Yeah.
That no matter how huge it is, you kind of believe it because he believes it so much.
Yes.
And that's power. That is hard. You cannot manufacture something like that.
For sure.
That's what movie magic is. It's just, it lives there and breathes. Whereas any given performance by any given performer can just exist.
And isn't that the difference between like a really great genre actor and somebody who gets forgotten, is that with every role, with every film, they're bringing something new. They're taking it totally seriously. It might be ludicrous. It might be, the script and the film might be completely over the top and tongue in cheek. And yet that actor knows it and is still going to find a way to make it as real and as grounded and fun to watch as you can imagine. That's real charisma, I think.
And I think he brings that to
Dr. Eck. Yes.
Dr. Eck. Because people, in his possessive voice, it's X. Which I'm like, that's got to be a reason for that.
Yeah.
But I feel like with a lot of your films, there's always this combination of elements. It's not just one thing. It's not just, oh, he's a Herschel Gordon Lewis fan and everything here is a play on Herschel Gordon Lewis. That is true for, a movie, but it's not true for all of the movies. They play in this, sort of cabinet of influences, and you're picking and choosing off the shelf. So where was the direction you wanted to go with Attic Expeditions? And how do you feel like you hit that? Did you paint the right target? Did you get close to what you wanted it to be? And no one hits perfect, so we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, especially your first movie, right? I mean, we shot on 35. We had a SAG cast. Those were great decisions. I'm really happy about them. We tricked all our friends into coming to California and crashing on a couch. And they, I think about 10 people came from Boston who were just, working in coffee shops after film school. And we were like, come on out, we're going to make a movie and we'll feed you. And we'd raise $20,000.
You're putting on a show. You're putting on a show, Jeremy. That's right.
Totally. Tom Sawyering everything all my life. That is it. I don't know that I'm talented, but the Tom Sawyering is where my skill set lies. So the things that we did well were the things that we could manage, right? We could manage to shoot on short ends. I got my friends to take that collapsing amazing Gothic mansion that was falling apart and paint it in all those crazy, giallo colors that I picked. And that stuff I'm so proud of. And the performances, the fact that, it really is a movie where I think even the people who'd never been in a movie before, our friend Shannon, I think, is great in that movie.
Yeah, she is.
It's the 20-year anniversary this year, and it's coming out. Severin is putting out a 20-year anniversary Blu-ray.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm so excited because it's never been out in high def, and we're doing value-added pieces, and I just did a reunion with Alice Cooper and Jeffrey, and I am not like in any way saying I'm some brilliant But the thing that they talked about that was so sweet is the unbridled enthusiasm that I think I still have and that is totally genuine. I think you can feel it in that movie. It just feels like, I'm making a movie. I grew up on genre, and I always wanted to stumble into some weirdo movie that you'd get high and watch when you're 17 and be like, what the fuck is this? This is weird. It's smart and
that's
weird.
That's the thing I love about it is how weird it is. It is deliciously weird in that there's no theremin music, but there's theremin implied throughout it.
There's a musical saw. The score has a musical saw, so it is like a theremin.
So, but it has that vibe of this is weird science. Yeah. And that, people are melding, mysticism and science together. And this crazy psychology. And, Wendy Roby is just, she's part and parcel a part of it because I don't think anyone else could sell what she's trying to do there.
I agree.
And
she's great.
There is a vibe to it that I think is unique to a lot of your films, and I think certainly the most successful of them, of a 50s, early 60s throwback of gone awry. Like this is it's fallen down a spiral staircase and woken up dizzy, and then the movie begins.
I think that's what works about the movie. I think that there are things I love and things that I cringe when I watch. But it definitely feels like, like you don't really know at any point. Like sometimes it feels like it's really under control, and sometimes it feels like it's just are they making this up as they went along? I don't really know if they know what's going to happen in this movie. And then when we wanted that, I love that, and we talked about it a lot while we were making it. And when I see it now, I think, I wish I felt a little. I was surprised when it came out how angry people were about that, and I understand now. I've worked so hard over the career of the several films I've been lucky enough to make to manage making mindfuck movies that are also satisfying. Mm-hmm. I was shocked that everybody didn't think it was fun to watch something that felt like the filmmaker was slowly losing their mind while they were making the movie.
So how do you then, what is the process to get from attic expeditions to, you kind of have like a 1, 2, 3 punch. You go that, and there's a little bit of a gap, but then you're like, bam, 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 bam. You got All Souls Day, The Thirst, Wizard of Gore. Like you're lining them up and knocking them down. Yes. Was there something, did just attic expeditions, people going, oh no, that's a shot. Oh, that's a scene. Oh, he can make a movie. Was that what sort of woke everything up?
If only it worked this way. That would be amazing. That's what I thought was going to happen, is I was going to make a movie, and then people would be like, welcome to the club. Mm-hmm. Here's what do you want to make next? We had gotten the remake rights to 5 of Herschel Gordon Lewis's movies, and I wanted to just tear into the remakes. I thought that was a good way to have something that had a built-in kind of name value, because Attic had problems with that. And we just struggled to raise money for years. And at the same time, I just kind of went back to my day job after Attic Expeditions. And nobody called to say, do you want to make a movie? And so, it took years to lock in The Wizard of Gore. And while that was happening, I had edited a movie called The Specials, mm-hmm. that the producer reached out, years later, maybe 5 or 6 years later, and said, hey, I got this script for a project called All Souls Day. Are you interested? I read it. It was not very good, but I would definitely never say no. And I said, yeah, of course. This is great. I love it. And 3 months later, he called and said, we start shooting in, 3.5 weeks. We have to have it rewritten by the end of the week. Can you leave your day job? And I said, I'll be there in 45 minutes.
Oh, I have a helicopter. Excellent. Never. Welcome to Los Angeles.
How bad was the kids screaming in the background? Is it clean
no,
upable?
No, we're all fine. Listen.
Thank God for this new microphone.
Gina, who sadly cannot be here today because she's wrapped up in festival review stuff, but she lives in New York City. Like, you hear the city where she is.
Sure,
This
yeah.
is just part
You can't
and
get
parcel.
away from it.
So from All Souls Day, you move on to The Thirst, and I think The Thirst is a real interesting example of someone trying to nudge their way into a genre that has been done to death and trying to find some level, like some way to take a basic thing that has been scary and non-scary, it's been comedic, that's been a Western, that's been this, that's been that, and trying to find some personal way to express how vampirism can mean something to somebody. And in there you have a really, really well-drawn performance by Claire Kramer.
That's so nice. I think so too. I love The Thirst. I think it's got things that really work and things that don't work. It was the same guys that I did All Souls Day for, and Claire, I think, is amazing in it. I agree. There was a draft of that script, and I've never gotten to talk about this anywhere, but I just want to say this.
Sure.
That I really wanted to make that the guys just wouldn't go for, where the whole, the idea is not new. The like near dark thing of it's a cult like family that's drawing people in. And I really wanted to play on the Manson thing and this idea that there's all that sexy stuff with vampires. And I wanted to kind of play with that. But I love the idea that you find out at the end of the movie, they aren't vampires. They're just lunatics who are drinking blood, and somebody dies in a really normal way, like gets hit by a car or something. And you're like, wait, the leader just, I don't understand. And then like very quickly you reveal, no, you don't have eternal life. You just fell in with a bunch of drug addicts. They were crazy. That movie, I still have burning in me. That's such a cool idea that, like, because it's gross. Drinking blood is that's a disgusting idea. And it's always made into like a sexy thing. So I love the idea of like turning it, like the Manson family, like, oh, free love. And look at all the girls we have. But really, they were probably really smelly and they lived in the desert and probably all had like crabs. That doesn't seem like, it seems like it would seem cool until you got to the Spawn Ranch. And then you were like, oh my God, you guys, you never bathe. That's gross.
Speaking of really gross, this is our opportunity then to
Great
really
segue. That's awesome. Again, that's why you're the writer.
Let's get into Herschel Gordon Lewis, because this is the thing that I respect the idea of Herschel Gordon Lewis. I admire the tenacity and desire to simply put a vision on a screen and how he pushed a medium forward. What I have trouble doing is getting through a Herschel Gordon Lewis movie.
I don't disagree now that I'm an adult. When I was 11, it was easy.
I think
honestly,
and because
it wasn't that much on video either,
No, it wasn't on video, and because they were so and weirdly gory. Although you look at it now, and you're like, how much hamburger did you pick up from the pick and save to put this on? But they couldn't show it on Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, because of that. Like, it had this reputation of, oh my God, these things are so depraved. They can't be seen in normal ways.
Yes.
So when I again appreciate all these things, but I also find it difficult to actually put my love of all those things I do love about it into practically loving Herschel Gordon Lewis movies. So what is your love of Herschel Gordon Lewis movies?
Well, so back to the Baltimore thing, I grew up on thinking John Waters, and I still think he's, an amazing, like he's a visionary.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
He loves Herschel Gordon Lewis. And so I got into it because John Waters said to get into it, basically. And so even when I didn't really get it, I pretended to, and I was like, oh, these are really interesting. These are so cool. They're so sleazy. But I have to say, the thing about those films that is brilliant is that he was the first to that party. I mean, that is an incredible thing to be. Nobody had really thought to have that, like the Grand Guignol approach to movies. Horror up to that point was, Val Lewton films and The Black Cat and, Shadows and, there'd be some other stuff, but there wasn't really, nobody had ever thought to have, to get butcher shop rejects and lay them on a lady in a bathtub and pour red paint on her in a bra and panties, in the mid 60s, early 60s. That was really, puerile and amazing because he sold it that way and he pushed that. And the other thing that I really love that even now about those films is they don't take place, they're not on a set. You're not in on a sound stage. It doesn't feel safe in that way. You're in somebody's dumpy suburban home in South Florida, and it looks and feels that way. It feels like the suburbs, and it's depressing. Even when they're nice homes, it's like, oh God, people live like this, and it gives it an immediacy that I think, I don't think it was intentional on his part, but it works really well in those movies because they feel like they're from another planet.
Yeah, well, there's a verisimilitude.
Yes.
Him, Al Edmondson, there's that sort of found art object element to them that makes them so unique and interesting because there's no part of it that is processed.
Right.
It's just what it is.
The actors all tried. And even when they're terrible, they're trying really hard. I mean, they are all terrible. Everybody in almost all of his movies, except for maybe 2000 Maniacs, is pretty stagey. They're just not good actors. But nobody is being silly. They're all trying to be good actors. So even though it's easy to mock, you end up with a different kind of film when everybody is taking it seriously. So that works in his favor, like the verisimilitude of being in, a lime green living room with shag carpet in South Florida with a pendant lamp. And,
it's a pastel nightmare, Jeremy.
Totally. Yeah.
So crazy.
Exactly.
So of the things that was Wizard of Gore like, this is the thing I think I should make, or was that just that was what you wanted to aim for?
Because it's on a stage, and I always feel like I have a lot of comfort with. I think that's cool. I like horror movies that have a stagey element. I love that, and it's his other movies are pretty straightforward. It's really the only one that's that weird. And because it's weird and the narrative's broken, I mean, that movie feels like they made it up as they went along.
Yes. It's very episodic.
Sense. Totally.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really, and it's got scenes that feel like they were added later just to stretch it out. And then the stage, there's so many cool ideas, but it never coalesces. I think, like my Wizard of Gore, there's so many cool ideas and it doesn't quite make it, but it's close. But it felt right for the picking because, no offense to the, filmmaker Tim who remade 2000 Maniacs, but that movie, it's Brigadoon as a horror movie, right?
Yeah.
It's not really, there's, and that's the idea for the remake. There's no place you're going to go that feels, like you're covering new ground. With the Wizard of Gore, is the pretty wide open, so you could kind of take the idea and have a quasi faithful remake, but totally redo it, and nobody's gonna get mad. Nobody's gonna say
because you made a movie out of it.
Right? Exactly. That's my favorite movie. Why would you remake Psycho? Like, I get it, who would? But the Wizard of Gore, you're not going to tread on any. Nobody's going to get that bummed.
So let's then, because I could talk about Wizard of Gore all day, but I do want to get to the dead ones because that's a movie that has taken it's had a journey. Like,
oh yeah,
it's not to say some movies sit on a shelf for a lot of reasons. But you all dedicate yourself to doing something. And you can line up every duck and get them all in a row and still have fate come by and smack you in the face. So how does the dead ones go to a movie that you have the financing to make, the financing to cast, and the financing to edit, but not the financing to release?
Well, that's a good question. I originally conceived of the dead ones with Zach Chassler, the writer, and the executive producer, Niels Harbo, as a reaction to the Wizard of Gore, because as we discussed the last time I was on, I had a lot of problems with the financiers kind of gumming up the works,
right,
and wanting to step in and tell Crispin Glover what to wear. And I was like, nah, it's fun to make movies with a budget, but I'd rather go back and make something with no name cast and just make a super efficient little horror movie where I made all these movies where, like with The Thirst, or less with Attic, but certainly with The Thirst and Wizard, I had something to say, but I felt like it got lost a little bit. By the time Wizard came out, I felt like I was trying to make a movie about misogyny, but it's still got tits and blood and the Suicide Girls. And I'm not sure that anybody who's watched it thinks like, boy, this filmmaker really has something to say about misogyny in horror movies. So all of those things brought the dead ones to the fore. We conceived of a horror movie about something that was really important to us and wanted to keep it small, efficient. I didn't want to shoot in LA. I made all my other movies in LA and had great experiences, but I wanted to shoot, like the Gordon Lewis thing. I wanted to shoot in a real high school that you hadn't seen in a million TV shows and high school movies. And I wanted to shoot with real high schoolers who weren't, on the Disney Channel next week and doing a yogurt commercial the week before, and just less, not jaded, but just less like me when I was rejected from the School of the Arts. I wanted people who were like really, coming to it from a pure place. Sure. So we put the financing together. It was like, a very modest and streamlined budget. Went to Baltimore to shoot it, cast it with somewhat ironically, Pat Moran, who was John Waters' producer and has gone on to a, stellar career as a casting director, did The Wire, won the Emmy several times for that. So she's like great at finding, these like undiscovered talents. That's her thing. And we went way over budget. We took money from the state of Maryland and didn't really, for so many reasons. It was more union than Los Angeles, which is a whole nother discussion, but just very complicated. Not a lot of crew to pick from. These were all the people who had made The Wire, so they were used to short TV hours. And our line producer, who was like the hookup for the commercial world, who had all his special deals, got Lyme disease 2.5 weeks before we started shooting and was in the hospital just like at death's door. So the deals that were like about to happen never came to fruition. And that's my understanding of why it went super over budget in Baltimore. I'm sure there were a million other reasons. We shot for 16 days, which is not a long enough schedule. And it got unwieldy fast, but it was, what we got was great. And, it's a school shooter ghost story. So it was already tough. It was tough to, secure the high school location. You'd go and, I was looking at schools with the head of the Maryland Film Commission, and here I was, a Baltimore boy making good, coming home to make a movie, and they'd show you the location, and then you'd tell them what the movie was going to be, and they wouldn't want to shoot there. And I understand why, but none of those people had any problem when we told them we were making a horror movie where high schoolers were going to be hunted by a masked killer. But once it had a context then if it was about something real, then that was too much. And again, I get it, but it made it, once we ran out of that initial investment, it just became impossible to get it back on its feet. It had a lot of digital stuff that I was cavalier about as an editor. I was like, oh, well, if we can't find this set, let's just build it. We'll shoot it on green screen and I'll fix it in LA. And of course, that's idiotic thing to do. Don't watch those Robert Rodriguez DVD extras and be like, I can do that, because you can't. So yeah, it took a really long time. Every time we'd line up financing or, a big digital effects company, Sandy Hook would happen, or, it just, the phenomenon of school shootings already obviously existed in 2009, but it got so much worse in those ensuing years that, people got cold feet a lot, and it just shut it down. And, you move an inch a week, you'd have a guy do 12 green screen shots in 6 months and be like, whew, good, we're really moving now.
So at any point did this, because the film, to a certain, I don't want to give away everything about it, because I do feel that the sort of glib component of it would be to simply put it in the school shooting realm, when ultimately it's not really about glorifying that or making a huge realistic version of it.
Yes,
it's more about the cycle, sort of the ramifications of that. I'm trying to do this in a way that doesn't give away the actual plot, but did you ever feel like you were trapped in that school well after the fact? Like those kids are trapped in that school?
Yes. Yeah. No, I never thought about it in that way, but yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. 11 years, man. I met my wife. I have 3 kids. I am have a completely different existence I'm a different human being. And the world is different than when we made that movie. I'm shocked it has not, there are no cell phones in it. Thank goodness. There's a lot of things that could have gone sideways with dating it. And I think we got lucky. I'm glad we shot on the red. Well, let me say something about where you were headed.
Sure.
And just say that with each step of making that movie, because I'd made a bunch, not a ton of movies, but enough movies to have had, my share of angry reviews on the internet and frustration with telling stories that didn't get the story that I wanted to tell across. We put a lot of work into that. We rewrote the movie a ton. We did staged, table reads. We edited it for several years. We didn't have any money, so we just kept re-editing it until we were happy. But for each part of making that movie, we had to really carefully examine the story we were telling, because the last thing I want to do, I want to make a movie for horror fans like me who could watch it and not be on the side of the school shooter. So it's a horror movie that tells that story, but I hope at no point during it are you rooting for violence. I hope that look, school shootings are horrifying. People always say to me, in the last year or so, as I've been doing a little bit of festivals, not so much because of COVID, but why wouldn't you make this as a drama? Or it seems like there's a story here that doesn't need to be a horror movie. But I don't, one, think that's the audience that I really wanted to speak to. And 2, I don't think school shooters, they are horrific. It's appropriate. And it's a surreal, it's a nightmare-scape version of a school shooter. And I don't want to give away too much either, but like my other movies, it's kind of, surreal and, mindfuckish. And
there's a Twilight Zone-ish thing going on to it.
I hope so.
That I think puts it in a different realm beyond. I don't feel like exploitative is the direction in which the film is trying to go in terms of its subject matter.
The Twilight Zone is such a great example, because that's it's so much fun. It's so smart, but it has like a pretty rigid morality. And I think that this movie does too, I hope. And you never want to be the guy who made the horror movie. I don't want to make. I love Clockwork Orange, but that must suck to have somebody copycat dress up as your icky character for Halloween and not get what you were trying to say.
Yeah. I totally get that. So out of this sort of experience, and then you do Theater Bazaar. There's still stuff that you're doing constantly. You get caught up in a TV show that gets shut down by the Vatican at one point.
That's right. I did The Exorcist Files, which was probably, I have to say, the most fun I've ever had on set, because I always had this dream of being like one of those directors on the lot in the 30s where like you go and like, you're all right, you're assigned to stage 4, you're doing a boxing picture, and then the next day you punch your punch card and they're like, okay, you're doing a romance on stage 9, and you're just like hopping around. And Exorcist Files, truly every day it was like a different story, a different actors. Okay, here we are. And a lot of them weren't, they were like models or whatever, like the people they cast. I didn't have any hand in it. So I just show up on the day at a location I didn't pick, and a story I didn't write, and okay, figure out how are you going to make this girl levitate in a church. And it was so much fun because it had that kind of giddiness that I love, but a full crew and a good budget, and it was great. But yeah,
putting on a show.
Aired. Yeah, I think it aired once or twice. It was a series. I think it shot 10 episodes, so each episode had 2 stories. So there's like 20 stories I got to tell that the world will never see. They bragged. You know what happened? They bragged. The network bragged in like Us Weekly that they had the cooperation of the Vatican, and don't do that. That's a bad thing. You don't have the cooperation of the Vatican.
Well, that's what I'm putting on the label of this episode, is that it's sponsored by the Vatican. Right. And what are they going to do about it?
Right. Yeah.
They got no power. Yeah. So then at a party, you come in with your lovely wife and you say, yeah, we've been thinking about, homesteading and just, learning how to live off the land. And we're moving to Maine. And this is another one of those incidents where I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? How are you just moving to Maine and learning how to make your own soap? You're going to run baths by heating up gallons of water and dumping it into a clawfoot tub.
It's true.
Like, so do you, what was the impulse that said, this is something I need to learn? Because that doesn't feel like, well, everyone in Baltimore wants to do this.
Yeah, no, I did not grow up. My parents they still are completely confused by it. My wife's parents, we told our families at Thanksgiving dinner. So, in LA, and we had 2 kids, like we had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. We still have those kids, by the way, but they're older.
No, I've seen proof of life.
Proof.
Like they're still out there.
They've survived this transition.
Yeah, they're cute.
Yeah, the shucks. We just said like we're gonna move, and we moved right after Christmas to Maine in the wintertime, which I would, if anyone is thinking about moving from Southern California to Maine, I'm going to say the fall is a good time, or the spring, maybe not right after Christmas. That's a little intense.
Yeah. Ramp up into it.
Yeah. So much better that way. You don't need to be learning how to split firewood the week you get here. You know what? It sounds so cliche, but I saw Food Inc., the documentary, and I already was like, I knew how miserable of lives chickens have. But I love meat. I love meat. I love cheese. I love eggs. And I was like, oh, it really fucked me up. I just felt like, well, we can't do that. And it's expensive to eat organic food if you lived in Pasadena. And I also, I was an editor for a long time. That means I was at a computer in a small dark room, on 6-day weeks for 16-hour days a lot. And I wanted to go outside and do things and move my body so I didn't die. And we had kids, and I could see that they, we had a little yard, and I wanted them to have more of that. And I don't know, man. I mean, my wife and I met and we lived in downtown Los Angeles and we went out drinking all night and we'd come back at, she worked in a restaurant and she didn't get off till 1:30 in the morning. So, she'd wait till like 5 a.m. and we were like, had finished 2 bottles of whiskey and she'd be like, but don't you really want to just homestead? Isn't that really what you want to do? Living in my loft in downtown. And I didn't even know what that meant. But she was right. I did kind of actually really just want to homestead. And we moved in, we started looking for schools on the West Coast to learn, because I didn't grow up knowing how to do, I wasn't in I did theater. I knew how to put on a show, like you said. I've never had a house. I've never done anything normal. By the way, we have hot water that works in our home. We moved in with a guy who did not.
Yes,
and that was
the schooling part was where you were heating up your own tub of water, and I'm still somewhat scarred by the thought of it.
He lit a fire under a cast iron tub and filled the tub with like snow, and then that was really part of my life for like 9 months. It was crazy. There's no hot water. We moved a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old in with a virtual stranger who looked like Grizzly Adams, with bib overalls and a big beard, but he was super charismatic and, probably finished. He was very well read and charming, and he made his own wine. And
this is how you end up in a vampire cult, Jeremy.
I mean, we thought that. We really did. It was risky for sure. I mean, but it was a great way to start a brand new chapter, and it was the right time to do it. And I don't regret it at all. I got to make a bunch of movies. I'm so glad, but that was all changing too. And I started to make a living in reality TV, and I didn't really have a love for, and I was surrounded by people who also loved reality TV, and that was confusing for me because I have that like conversation with other editors by like the water cooler at 2 a.m. after like, that aforementioned 16-hour day, and I just assumed everybody else was slumming too. And I'd be like, well, what do you really want to make movies too, right? And they would be like, no, I've read all the books written by, what's the name of the guy who made Survivor? Rob. Yeah. So, I mean,
all I
people
can think
love
is
that
Rob
shit,
Tappert,
man.
and that's not right.
Yeah.
The guy who produced Xena and then married Xena.
Right. That's right.
And produced The Evil Dead.
Way cooler. I would have been much more happy if they did.
Be Rob Tappert in this world, everyone. Yeah. Do it today. Check it out.
So, and we did it. We took a crazy leap. I mean, it was scary, and it's still, there are times where we feel, like we're it's a little out of control, trying to figure out how to do things. But a lot of it, like everything else, you get used to it. People always say, like, because I raise chickens and I slaughter them myself, and I love them, and then we eat them. And people, my dad, everyone says, I could never do that. But you probably could if you were hungry. And, I mean, we're not starving, but you end up getting used to all kinds of, I lived in a dorm, man. People, pooped in the sink when they got drunk. I got used to it.
Get used to sink pooping.
Right.
I think
that's
is
part of the college experience, right?
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you're like, oh my God, somebody crossed a line that I just didn't realize could be crossed.
You could make a rule not to do that, or you could get used to it. Right. And the lesson learned here is get used to it.
Yeah.
So Jeremy, where can people get in contact with you, online, so they know, because I didn't know about the attic expeditions coming out from Severn. That's fantastic news.
I'm so excited. Yeah. So I'm Jeremy Scare Me on Twitter. Also Jeremy Scare Me on Facebook, and the Dead Ones on Facebook is the Dead Ones page. There's the Dead Ones website is TD1S, TD1S, like the Dead Ones, or you can type in the Dead Ones. It's going to take you there too. And yeah, I have my own website, jeremykasten.com. And if you go there, it's got my farmy stuff. And if you go to the menu, I've got a whole other website of all the horror stuff, including, an archive of all of my trailers and my interviews and everything that's ever happened in the world of icky that I've made.
Excellent. I really look forward to a lot of this. And I look forward to one day you putting on a show in a barn finally.
You know about that, right?
See it. Yeah.
It's coming. It's
Yeah.
really, we're you know, if you've seen my barn, you know it's a long way off, but it is coming. I have stick-to-itiveness and a Tom Sawyer thing that I'm going to make it happen. We'll just keep pushing that boulder up the mountain.
I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. So that just about does it for us in the special edition of Kill by Kill. Please check out Jeremy's stuff and the films that are coming out in Blu-ray, which are great. And that does it until next time, everybody, for myself and for Jeremy. The body count will continue. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.